Well, welcome back to IrishRacing.com's Jump to It show, the Irish Angle. Of course, I'm not Vincent Finnegan. I'm just stepping in for this week's. We're going to review the action from the weekend. So, of course, action at Punchestown, as well as Fairyhouse and action in the UK. I'm joined once again by Emma Nagle and Johnny Ward as well. Emma, I'll start with you because the action at Fairyhouse produced a winner for the Eugene O'Sullivan yard. Tell us a bit about Corbett's Cross. You were there on Friday.
Yeah, I went down to Eugene's on Friday to do a bit of a stable tour, and Corbett's Cross is obviously a very exciting horse in the yard at the moment. In fairness, he won very well on Saturday. Probably wasn't the strongest handicap in the world, but he could only beat what was in front of him, and he did a kind of ears pricked. Probably loads left behind the tank, you'd think. It was an interesting one actually. Before I went down to the yard, I didn't know that he'd actually been sold to Paul Byrne since his last run, which is an interesting boy. Paul's obviously a very shrewd buyer of a horse, so he obviously thought he saw a good one there, and he's going to stay with Eugene till the end of the season. I think he's going to probably more than likely head to Emmett then after that, which probably a bit of a pity. You like to see the smaller yards with kind of the flagship horses, but it's good to see he'll keep him until the end of the year anyway, and he has plenty of options even now over hurdles. He's probably a chaser in the making really, probably a national horse in time you'd think even, but he has options now. I think they were kind of thinking of heading to Cheltenham, and he'll have options in handicap hurdles, or the Martin Pipe probably with Michael up on board might be an option, or he probably wouldn't disgrace himself in an Albert Bartlett even if the ground came up soft. So he's an exciting horse for them to have, and yeah, hopefully they'll find a few more among the young horses in the yard. It's kind of mostly a point-to-point yard, so they keep producing a good one every now and again, and good to see him keeping one now on the track even.
Yeah, and not to spoil too much about the stable tour that will be live on IrishRacing.com later on in the week, but can you just give us a couple of pointers, potentially some stars for the future from the yard?
Yeah, I mean, he has kind of more horses for the track now, so then maybe he would have. He's kind of always been mainly a point-to-point yard, kind of a selling yard. They'd buy to sell. But he has a good owner now at the moment in Manchester, the O'Sullivans, and they have a lot of nice horses in the air. A horse who won at Cork before Christmas, Meeting of the Waters, is probably a horse with a good future as well. Next year over fences, he could be one to follow. There was a few nice younger horses he showed me in the yard. I think in particular there was one by Scirocco. The name escapes me now, but it'll be on the video somewhere. He's probably one that'll be out in the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think Eugene was saying. So he'd be definitely one to follow, I'd say. He looked a lovely horse. So yeah, this probably looking bright. I think their horses are going well at the moment, so it's probably a good time for the yard.
Lovely. Johnny, just to bring you in as well, we're going to talk about Imperial Pass. Obviously an impressive winner of the Moscow Flyer at Punchestown on Sunday. What was your assessment of that performance, and where do you think he goes from here with Willie?
Yeah, just enjoying him as stable tours, and nice to see the footage as well. I think Corbett's Cross has actually already joined him at Mullins, would you believe? He was to join him, so it'll be a difficult one for Eugene, but maybe he'll be a source of horses for Paul Byrne maybe going forward, and I suppose that's the reality of the smaller trainer, that Eugene won't be a selling operation. He's having a great season. He looks a nice horse. Imperial Pass, yeah, Joe, it was a hard enough race, I suppose, to assess form-wise. Noel Mead provided the runner-up in a nice horse, the Model Kingdom, who had been beaten the time before and probably was maybe a little bit out of her depth, but she's still a good horse, and the turn of foot he's shown in these races, he's only raced twice for Willie Mullins, is quite impressive. Now, I still think, despite the fact that he dropped back to 2 miles and impressed, I still think they should run him in the Ballymore. I have a column with the odds checker. I actually tipped him for the Ballymore non-runner no bet last week, and there's definitely a suggestion maybe that he's showing the pace now to go for the Supreme, but he has a bit of a turn of foot, and apparently he doesn't show a lot at home either. His jumping looked very good. The race at Naas first time, they omitted 2 hurdles in the straight, so this was much more of a test, as much as it was a bit of a non-event in the sense of 2 horses went out, contested the pace. He was one of them, and very little got into it, but he looks really, really good. I mean, Willie has a second, third and fourth favourite, I think, for the Ballymore. I imagine 1 or 2 of them would go elsewhere, but I think, given that he won over 2-3 at Naas, and given that was on softish ground, I still think he's an Albert Bartlett horse, and of course it means he wouldn't have to take on Facile Vega.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you bring up the betting as well, yeah, you see Imperial Pass has been backed in from 10s into 6s, I'm looking at, for the Ballymore. So, I mean, Emma, as well, your point of view, how much were you impressed by that performance, and where do you think Willie's going to actually go with him?
Yeah, no, I liked him a lot coming into the race. He was very impressive when he's maiden before Christmas, obviously. But no, I agree with Johnny. I kind of saw him as a Ballymore horse. I was even surprised to see him go down to the 2 miles here, to be honest. But probably looked a good opportunity for him. Wasn't the strongest renewal, and look, he did it well. In fairness, he showed a very good turn of foot, and I think he's probably a horse for next year, even more so, regardless of what he does at the end of the season. Here, he looks probably a real chaser in the making. His jumping was just brilliant. It was so fast, but I wouldn't I wouldn't fancy him to beat Facile Vega at the same time in the Supreme. I think Facile Vega and Marie National are two very, very good horses, and this fella's probably more of an improver, more so than one that will be kind of at that level maybe this year, in my opinion anyway. But yeah, no, he's a very good horse, and the Ballymore probably looks a better option for him at the moment. It probably all depends on what Paul Townend wants to do, I suppose, more than anything. If he really fancies Champ Kiley to win, uh, he mightn't be pushing this fella as hard to the Ballymore. And I suppose when you look at the Supreme, outside the top two in the betting, it's probably not a race with a lot of depth in it. So, it's kind of, I suppose, all options open for him at the moment. But I'd probably be swaying towards the Ballymore. It's probably the race he has probably a better chance of winning for me. He probably has a good place chance in the Supreme, but I can't see him getting past Facile Vega.
No, and he is entered at the Dublin Racing Festival as well, right? So could we potentially see him come up against Facile Vega there?
I'd say it's probably unlikely, to be honest. He'd probably go straight to Cheltenham at this stage, but I suppose stranger things have happened as well. Yeah, I see Vegas in the 2 mile novice. I mean, probably guessing where Willie's going to send his novice hurdlers is anyone's guess. Like, probably wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibilities if Facile Vega could go to the Ballymore. Like, it's probably hard to see it happening, but I didn't think Sir Jarhard would go for the Ballymore last year either. So, trying to guess where Willie Mullins will send his novice hurdlers, it's a dangerous game to be playing, I suppose.
Now, one other horse did stand out for me at least was Impervious, beating Journey with Me. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that angle, that race as well, Johnny. Just give us your thoughts. And now she's into, what is it now? Pretty much, well, obviously favourite for the Mare's Chase at Cheltenham. Worthy favourite for you?
I think she's actually second favourite, Joe. I looked today. I think Allegra Devassi is favourite. I'm not a fan at all of these mares races at Cheltenham. I just think it's further diluting. And if you had these horses running against um, the good novice chasers, I think they get their mares allowance and all that, and I think it just makes the whole thing more interesting instead of having a situation where we could have, I don't know, 8 or 10 odds on favourites at Cheltenham this year. But that notwithstanding, she'd been brought along by Colin Murphy. She'd been good over hurdles, and her chase debut, she was very good in a good race. I think Cade Boy was in the race. He was well back for the Dan Moore actually at the weekend. That was a Wexford. She won that well. And then she stepped up to take on Dino Blue, who was favourite at Cork. So she kept to Mare's company. And I think she was sort of looked like she was struggling at the second last, but ended up winning really, really well. And then she stepped into another grade altogether, I thought, anyway, yesterday when she was taking on Hador Journey with Me. Good horses in general, and even Willie had a horse in the race that was sent off. I'm just looking at the prices here. Willie had a horse in the race that was sent off a huge price as well, and it looked like Manella Crooner was an easy to back 5-1 chance, despite having very, very good form. And Impervious, who was backed, Glengooley was the Willie horse, sorry, was sent off 33-1. He's not bad, and he was sent off 33-1. And despite the fact that she was actually given weight to Journey with Me and Manella Crooner on account of her penalty, she still won, and she won quite readily. I know she won by half a length, but her superiority was more than that, and I thought this was a serious, serious performance. There were 22 lengths clear of Manella Crooner in third, who's a good horse. Hador had raced up with him. He was legless at the finish, and JP McManus is obviously, I'd imagine, spent good money for Impervious, but she looks like a really good horse, and I wasn't sure that she would relish this step up and trip, but she has a turn of foot with stamina. She's a brilliant jumper, really efficient jumper, and she doesn't need much to spare, and she's a hell of a mare.
Well, that's it. Yeah, like you say, I mean, would you rather just see her going in for a different race rather than the Mare's Chase?
Yeah, I would, but in fairness, if I owned her, I would. I'd probably go for the Mare's Chase as well. It looks like the more obvious race. Do you want to go taking on the likes of John Bon? Back in the day, fair enough. I'd prefer if there were no mares races and you didn't have the diluting that's happened at Cheltenham. But as it is now, I'd probably go for the mares chase. With her Cheltenham winner is a Cheltenham winner if you own the horse, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, moving on as well, I just want to cover a couple of the highlights from the UK action. So we had Green Glory for Charles Burns. Unfortunately, didn't perform maybe as well as expected. Were some kind of comments about potential issues with travel. But Emma, did you actually watch that race, and do you have an assessment on that performance?
Yeah, I fancied him coming into it. I thought he was very good at over Christmas, but to be honest, he just looked like a horse who was probably a bit green for that kind of a race. He didn't travel well enough at all early on, and Philip probably did well to get him into the race at all. Kind of early on in the race, it looked like he was kind of, I don't know, he was just not concentrated well enough, I'd say. And he's probably a horse who was well capable of winning a race like that, but he'll have to travel a lot better, and he just didn't on the day, and that really took his chance away for me.
Yeah, and Johnny, for you, any other highlights from the UK?
I mean, that race was interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a race where, you could say that Charles' horse ran well, and it was like a point to point. He ended up finishing last of the horses. In terms of the weekend in the UK, I imagine that might be the death knell for his potential participation in the Martin Pipe. Or at least I think he might have needed a penalty to get in, unless he wins in Ireland in the meantime. Pic D'Orhy was very good in the Silvianaco Conti chase. It's kind of funny now, just reading afterwards. Paul Nicholls, he seems to be saying he's better on a flat track, and Paul Nicholls' default position at this stage almost seems to be to shy away from Cheltenham, because I don't think he enjoys it as much because he's finding it so much tougher these days. But to be fair to this horse, like, he absolutely hacked up. He got into a great rhythm up front, and it was a very, very performance from a horse who I imagine we might see maybe more as an Aintree candidate than a Cheltenham candidate.
Yeah, and I think you're also talking just off air as well, just about the Dublin Racing Festival in general, the amount of entries from the UK, only 2 of the grade ones out of, 8 races. So Emma, just talk about why you think that could be. I mean, is it just not willing to kind of risk anything ahead of Cheltenham?
Yeah, I mean, it's vastly disappointing. Like, there's a lot of English race scores coming over now, and I'm sure they'd like to see the English horses coming over and putting in a good challenge. I mean, I don't think there's too many excuses for trainers not to be sending the horses over. Like, people are saying maybe it's too close to Cheltenham, but the Irish horses seem to relish the Dublin Racing Festival and Cheltenham doubles. So I don't think that's a really relevant excuse. Look, to be fair, at the same time, when you look through the races, there's probably not too many English horses you're really missing from them that are going to add real competition. I suppose Constitution Hill is the obvious one. I think everyone would have loved to see him being entered in the Champion Hurdle. He's on a really long break now between his last run in Cheltenham, so you would have thought it kind of would have worked out quite well for him, but obviously they're not going to take that chance. Probably not the most Nicky Henderson move, I suppose, to send him over before Cheltenham. Apart from that, you'd probably like to see a few in the Gold Cup as well. Maybe Brave Man's Game or something like that could have been entered, even if. It's kind of, I suppose the most disappointing thing is probably they're not even speculating going. It's not even on their radar to come over and take the chance, which it's kind of hard to understand with the prize money on offer, and it's not probably going to be a small bit easier to win a race there than at Cheltenham, you'd have to think. So it's probably worth rolling a dice for some of them, but obviously it hasn't come into contention, which it's just disappointing really more than anything.
Yeah, and Johnny, have you got any theories as to why that'll be?
Well, Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe. The exchange rate as well. I think it almost goes to show that the prize money isn't so much of a factor. We'll say like 140 grand, say for the winner of the Paddy Power Irish Gold Cup, 140 grand. That rates to 125 in terms of sterling. So it is quite attractive. But I think if you look at the hammering that British trainers are sort of becoming almost accustomed to getting at Cheltenham, I just think they don't see the point in it. I think they feel that if you look at some of the you wouldn't get that many Irish horses going over before Cheltenham for the British races. And I think they feel that it's not really worth their while taking on Willie Mullins. They have to take him on at Cheltenham despite the fact that I think it's very attractive for an owner to have. I'd say if you'd owned a horse that was coming over for the Dublin Racing Festival and you're a British owner and your horse based in Britain, I'd say you'd have a brilliant time. Everyone would be asking you about the horse. You have a great night out in Dublin, and you'd savour the city, and it's only racetrack, and they have a great day out. But I think for the trainers, they're just not attracted to the idea anymore.
Yeah, it's just too stern a test, I guess, against the best opposition as well. But yeah, you raise a good point actually about the attendance figures. The English, or at least the British, seem to be sending a lot more over to Dublin. So how well received is that kind of in Ireland and for the Irish racegoers?
Yeah, well, I mean, the figures that I think were in the Racing Post today. I'm just looking here now in terms of the drop in attendance in Britain 2023 to 2022 was quite stark. The figures was it something like 14% or something like that? I don't have the figures to hand, but so final 14.4% down 2022 from 2019. So we're not immune from these issues over here, and I think the day-to-day stuff, Joe, it's not the easy sell anymore. But festivals absolutely, and I can attest to going to Laytown and seeing the crack that the British have when they come over, and you see it in Punchestown. And I think the Dublin Racing Festival anecdotally is becoming a bit of an attraction to the British racegoer, and absolutely it adds so much to the meeting when you have that international kind of flavour to it.
I think, for me as a race goer, I've been in that situation as well, but obviously being an Englishman, going over to Dublin. I mean, it almost doesn't really matter where the horses are from. So if they're British trainers or Irish trainers, it doesn't matter. You're there for the crack and the good times that come with the festival. So I imagine that means it's been marketed very well to the British public, and obviously the more Brits go in. I think I saw a stat, was it 1 in 5 tickets going to Brits now? So yeah, really interesting to see that develop. Obviously going up in Cheltenham.
The other thing as well, Joe, this was brought in 6 weeks before Cheltenham, specifically because it bridges that gap between Leopardstown and Cheltenham. But there's no excuse whatsoever in terms of it hurting one's chance in Cheltenham. And if I were a British owner, you can compare Punchestown to the Dublin Racing Festival in terms of quality that's compressed into 2 days. There's no comparison whatsoever. Like, Punchestown has good races, but there's a lot of rubbish as well. And Leopardstown is all about quality from start to finish.
Absolutely. One other point as well, I just wanted to touch on briefly as well, just with Emma. Davey Russell returned. I mean, you spoke about it on the show last week. Wasn't a big surprise that he came back, stepping in for Jack Kennedy, of course. But how good was it to see him back in the winner's enclosure?
Yeah, I know. I suppose it probably wasn't a massive surprise to see Davey back. I think Johnny kind of said he had to come back last week. So, yeah, look, it's probably disappointing for the young lads in the yard, but you can understand why Gordon has leaned on him. Like, at the time of the year, especially, like, they're coming up to the Dublin Racing Festival now in a few weeks' time, and then Cheltenham. So to be a lot of pressure to put on the young lads, and probably Gordon's owners probably would want to be relying on a more experienced jockey at the top stage. And like when Davey was there and only retired a few weeks, it was a no-brainer really. And it's kind of business as usual. Now he came back and he never left, I suppose. I'm looking forward to him now coming back to Cheltenham, because he was always my favourite jockey to watch at Cheltenham. I think he rode the course probably better than anyone. So yeah, I might have a few euro on him to top jockey at Cheltenham now, maybe, to be kind of a bit of a fairy tale.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, that'll be the story of the season. Yeah, if he comes back to be top jockey, that'd be amazing. Johnny, as well, your view on Davey's return?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think Emma must recall better than me last Monday what I was saying, because I think it probably only sort of came up as a possibility maybe I know some bookmakers had markets on us. I think the likes of Star Sports and Fitzwilliam definitely had markets. Star Sports, Davies, an ambassador for them, and they had to suspend the betting. And I think some people were putting 2 and 2 together. But I did feel, and I get like what Davies saying, in the sense that this is, I think, trying to help out Gordon, probably scratch a bit of a niche that he's had in the few days since he retired to come back as well. But like to actually help out Gordon and have that experience at Cheltenham, and his actual retirement, because Thurles wasn't his retirement as it turns out, his actual last ride will be interesting. And I think it's almost written in the stars that he's going to have a big winner at Cheltenham or somewhere down the line. And that's not to say Jack won't even get to Cheltenham, but I think it's great to have the second coming of Davey, and so it's a great narrative every day that we have racing between now and March.
Absolutely. I mean, almost does it feel like fate that it was destined to happen, because like you say, the Thurles retirement kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Yeah, because I mean the comparison with Frankie Dettori was made at the time. One of them was retiring and taking a year out of it. Davey retired over the course of a split second. Really, he the winner at Thurles in December. This meant that he was not only going to miss Cheltenham, but he was going to miss the Dublin Racing Festival. Now, I spoke to Cheltenham and the Dublin Racing Festival. I spoke to David Jennings of the Racing Post the weekend, and he was sort of the opinion that Davey might have been turned by the fact that Jack was sort of the stable jockey now and he was getting the second string. Maybe that was the case, and maybe it was married to the fact that, I think if you were a doctor, you just advise him to get out while the going was good. So it was an interesting way of doing it. He spoke really well of Thurles as being the home of race, and I thought that was nice because it really is. There's a real love of national hunt racing in that part of the world, and Thurles has been Ireland's all-weather track before we had an all-weather track, I suppose. But he did it in such a low-key manner. I love that, and I I don't know what Davey's Davey's a hard fella to get a handle on at times, but maybe when he asked me to write his autobiography down the line, it'll all be revealed.
Oh yeah, I look forward to reading that. We're going to wrap up, I think, with just some key horses to follow for the week. Emma, we'll start with you if you've got any in mind, and also looking ahead to the Clarence House on the weekend.
One that caught my eye massively over the weekend, he was one I mentioned, I think before Christmas, Mr. Incredible. I thought he ran a massive race in Warwick. He was given kind of an encouraging ride, I suppose, by Brian Hayes. He was just kind of teasing him around the whole way, trying to get him to finish, I suppose, more than anything else. And I was kind of laughing. I was watching it with my father, and I was saying we were interested in him. I was telling him about Patrick Mullins and his kind of interesting training techniques he was using on him when I saw him down one day. And I was saying this horse would fly home, and I was just laughing when he jumped the last and his ears pricked and he started flying home. Brian probably didn't want to hit him too early because in case he would stop. So he's probably a fella, if they can keep him sweet, he'll have a big pot in him, you'd imagine. It was interesting after the race. I think there was a quote saying that Patrick wanted to win the Kim Muir, so how many pounds he'll go up will be interesting. I think he's 142 at the moment, so if he went up too much, I think that's max 145. So, but yeah, he's probably one for one of those big handicap chases, maybe even the national in time, and yeah, he'll be an interesting one to follow, I'd say.
Lovely stuff. Well, once again as well, Emma, thanks for your views and thanks for your work on the stable tour. That will be going live on Wednesday. Johnny, just to wrap up our show today, just give us your thoughts on maybe some eye catches of the week and also what you're looking forward to this week.
You could give the two horses that Paul Byrne is involved in, Mr. Incredible, who I think these characters are great for racing, that you sort of can't really rely on them to sort of do what you want them to do or even jump off. And Paul Byrne has said that subsequently that, as much as it looks a shrewd purchase, obviously it could go P-Tong, yes. Even though if they can keep them sweet, as Emma says, he hasn't mentioned, I'm going to give Corbett's Cross as a horse to follow as well. But I suppose I tried to give horses that didn't win. And I'm going to I thought the Race Displays hurdle, the winner's hurdle for juveniles at Fairyhouse, quite interesting. Blood Destiny is a horse that is emerging as a very, very good juvenile, despite the fact he doesn't show a lot at home. But I'm going to give a mention to a couple of horses in behind. Paradise Lost initially, who was 40-1 for Charles O'Brien, but he was one of the last horses off the bridle, and he's by Australia. I'm not exactly sure what ground he wants, but Charles O'Brien has really only run him on soft ground, so that would sort of imply that he actually does like this type of ground. But the horse I will give he's had a couple of goes at it at a good level so far over hurdles, and that is Common Practice, who's by Glen Eagles. Now, he has already had 5 goes over hurdles, 6 on the flat, and he won his maiden at Galway when he showed a really nice turn of foot. That form hasn't worked out great, but he battled on well to finish second behind Blood Destiny, and he won on good ground at Galway. Curra last year, and memorably, of course, turned out a day later at Galway, was just turned over at soft ground. He won if I remember right, he won the Apprentices Derby at Curra. I really like the way he goes in his races, and he's run prior to that when he ran very well in the good juvenile race the day before that, when he was sent off a huge price. I think that behind Lossiemouth, he's developing a nice bit of experience now, and I'd say Joseph Ryan is definitely going to run this horse in the Fred Winter. He looks made for it, and I think he's going to run a big race on the day, possibly at a big price, because the market seems to underrate him.
Lovely stuff. So potentially here one for your IrishRacing.com tracker, I think it's fair to say. Well, that wraps it up for today's show. So Johnny, Emma, once again, thank you for your views. We'll be back again next Monday to review the action. We'll also be back on Friday for another betting show with myself, Ed and Stephen, looking ahead to the Clarence House at Ascot. Plenty of good racing once again coming your way, so stay tuned for a lot more here from irishracing.com.